Hello, hope you guys are doing well, having a great week. I still miss you guys. I've gotten to see a few of you guys. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you on Saturday as we get ready to honor our seniors at the church. We're going to be meeting in the parking lot and doing a parade to celebrate their graduation, and I'm so excited. But it also excites me to think about how we are all gathering around our tables this Sunday to not just have this discussion, but to celebrate the Lord's Supper, which is what our text today is about. And so I would just want to, I know most of you have probably already done that as a family, celebrate the Lord's Supper. But this week, as we think about the table and as we think about, as we've been going through the book of Luke and thinking about what Jesus does at the table, what he teaches us, it brings us to Luke chapter 22. And in verse 14, we read this: "And when the hour came, he reclined at table, and the apostles with him. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, Take this and divide it among yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And likewise the cup, after they had eaten, saying, This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant of my blood. But behold, the hand of him who betrays me is with me on the table. For the Son of Man goes as it has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to question one another, which of them it could be who is going to do this." So there is a lot to think about in this passage. Jesus teaches us a lot at the table. And of course, this is just one section from Luke that talks about this table. And the rest of the Gospels really fill out what's going on at this Last Supper, as we call it. It's been depicted by artists. It's been retold in movies. And every week, of course, we remember this moment in Jesus' ministry. We remember this moment where he gathered with his disciples. And I want us to focus on what Jesus might have meant when he said to do this in remembrance of me. And so, like I said, there's a lot we could talk about with this particular passage. But I think there's one thing in particular that we can really focus in on today. There's a scholar named Randall Chestnut who says this about the Passover meal, which, by the way, is what Jesus was celebrating with his disciples when he institutes the Last Supper. The Last Supper is really not doing away with Passover, but it's reinventing the Passover. It's an evolution of the Passover, if you will. But Dr. Chestnut says this. He says about the Passover, one must appreciate the atmosphere created. He's talking about what we need to know about how important the Passover meal was to the Jews. So you need to understand the atmosphere. He says, the memories evoked, the praise inspired, the hopes rekindled, the festiveness aroused, the self-identity realized, and the communal solidarity nurtured by this sacred occasion. Okay, so there's all these things going on, all these emotions, all these memories, all these feelings, and all these significant things that happen at the Passover for the Jewish community. And it's those same things that should happen when Christians partake of communion, of this Last Supper, of the Eucharist meal. And so one of the most important elements, like I said, there's so much symbolism in the Passover meal and in the Eucharist, and we could talk about that all day. But one thing I just want us to focus on today is the element that's a big part of the Passover, which is retelling the story. So when Jewish families gather around a table to take the Passover meal, the head of the family or the host of the meal, they retell the Exodus story. So usually this is an elder of the family, and they retell the Exodus story, and it's that great story about how Israel was saved by God and brought out of slavery from Egypt, and told how to be the people of God and how to be free, and to treat each other well and be an example to the nations. And so they retell that story to remind those at this meal, to remind those who share this table of what God has done for them. And the way they retell that story is it's not just, long time ago, your grandfather, your great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother were slaves in Egypt. No, they say, when they retell the story, they say it like this. We were slaves to Egypt, and God rescued us. They retell this story, even though it may have been generations ago, as if it happened to them. And it's whoever at the Passover meal, the youngest member of the family, the youngest member at the table, it is his or her job to ask questions to that elder. So in the weeks leading up to the Passover meal, that young person's family will help him or her learn what questions they should be asking. And of course, they will come up with their own questions as well. But the elder will answer these questions and help them understand the Exodus story a little bit better, help them understand where they came from and who they are now. The Passover meal serves to identify them as they remember these stories. And so in the same way, when Christians take communion, when we take the Lord's Supper, we remember what God through Jesus has done for us. Jews and Christians alike, we find our identity in the story of God's redemption. God has saved us from slavery to sin, just as he saved Israel from slavery to Egypt. But another really important part of the Jewish Passover tradition is not just looking back and remembering what God has done, but it's also looking forward to what God has promised to do. So as part of the Passover, some of the symbols there and some of the way that the meal is eaten helps the Jewish community to look forward to the coming Messiah. And in the same way, when Christians take communion, when they take this Last Supper, they look back and we remember what God has done for us. We relive that past of God freeing us, of God delivering us from all the things that have enslaved us. But we also look forward with great hope and anticipation, and we eat this meal as if it's an appetizer of what God has promised us, of what He has told us is coming, and that is this full deliverance, this fullness of the kingdom of God that He has promised us is coming. And in the Lord's Supper, we get to taste a little bit of what that's like. And also in this Lord's Supper, in this Eucharistic meal, at this table, the table of Jesus, there is equity, there is equality. The Passover meal is something that in the Jewish community obliterates all cultural and social divisions, right? It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. It doesn't matter how healthy or sick you are. It doesn't matter how big or small your family was, because it's the great equalizer, because all Jews were slaves to Egypt. And as they celebrate the Passover, they all remember that they all came from the same place and God delivered them all. And in the same way, when Christians take the Eucharist, it reminds us that we were all slaves to sin and God has delivered us all. And so there's a lot more that we can say about the Lord's Supper. This sacrament, this meal that we take every week fascinates me. And I've written many papers about this and read many books about this few minutes that we spend together every Sunday celebrating the Lord's Supper. And it's such an important part of the Christian tradition. And I would be happy to make many more of these videos talking just about the Lord's Supper. But I want to stop here. I want us to just to think about those traditions that we really have inherited from our Jewish friends, about looking forward or looking back and looking forward, focusing on that specifically. And as we think about those two things, this is what I want you to spend the rest of this time as a family. So the video will end here in a minute. But what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to just think about what has God done for you. Take some time, and maybe whoever is oldest, whether that's mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever is there with you guys, take some time and just share with your family your story. Not just your personal story, but the story of your family, maybe even your ancestors. Maybe you know about what God has done for your parents or your grandparents, and share that with your family. And the youngest, just like in the Jewish tradition of the Passover, ask questions. Pursue a deeper understanding of what God has done for your family. I feel like this is something we don't do often enough. Many of us just don't know our family history and how God has moved with and through and for our families over the generations. So share some of those stories now. And as you look back, don't just look back, but also look forward with hope and anticipation, and share with each other the dreams that you have for what God is going to do for you. I hope that this is an encouraging time for you this morning as you look back and as you look forward. And I share with us some of the things that you discover as you share those memories and your hopes and dreams about what God will do. And I can't wait to hear what comes out of these conversations. Love you guys.